Gedegam Gizikwe Indigenous, Mshike Dodam, Saginaw Chippewa, Kino Donjaba. My English name is Sharon Skutt. My name at the boarding school was Sharon Walker. And I come from Detroit is where I was born. And we lived in the projects when I was really small, and then we eventually moved into single-family homes. Then in 1967, we moved to the reservation in Mount Pleasant, and from there, that fall is when we first attended Holy Childhood.
And what years did you go?
Attended Holy Childhood 1967 to 1970. At that point, I aged out after 8th grade.
Can you tell me a little bit about your community and your family before attending the school?
We spent a lot of time with my grandparents and my cousins, my siblings. My parents, my mom worked all the time, and my dad was kind of in and out. Sometimes he was there, sometimes he wasn't. And we did, on weekends, we'd go to my grandma's house for dinner, Sunday dinners. And, you know, my uncles would be playing cards, and my aunts would be just, you know, in the kitchen visiting and hanging out and that kind of thing.
All right, can you tell me a little bit about your parents and then your siblings?
Okay, my dad is, he was a member of the Saginaw Chippewa Indian tribe. He's deceased. My mother belonged to the Chippewa of the Thames First Nation, Canada. Her mother came from Belgium. I don't know what you want me to, about my siblings. I have 5 siblings. I have 2 brothers and 3 sisters. We all attended the boarding school, Holy Childhood, as late as the mid-70s, I believe. I was there for 3 years. My siblings were there, I think 7 years was the longest that any of them attended the school.
What did a regular day look like for you at home before boarding school?
Before boarding school, it was just a typical day. You know, we had breakfast in the morning, and, you know, during the school year, of course, we went to school. We had babysitters. Like I said, my mom worked, so we had either my grandmother would watch us, my dad's mom, or a babysitter would come and take care of us. Other than that, you know, we did go to bed early. My mom put us in bed like by 7 o'clock at night, so she had time to do laundry and make the next day's meal, so that when she got home, all it had to be was warmed up.
Growing up, was your family spiritual or religious?
Yes, I was baptized Catholic, raised Catholic, attended Catholic schools the majority of the time. There was a time in 5th grade that we went to public school, but we still had catechism on Sundays.
Do you remember how you first learned that you would be going to the school?
Yeah. So my dad attended Holy Childhood, and he liked it. He didn't have any bad experiences there. And my mom told us that we were going to be going there, you know, and so, I don't know, I was really excited about it because I used to watch a lot of Shirley Temple movies, and I don't know if you're familiar with Shirley Temple, you know there was a lot of dancing, a lot of singing. She was always surrounded by a lot of girls, so, you know, I was really excited about being able to go there.
Do you remember traveling to the school for the first time?
Yep. I remember we had a station wagon, and I believe we all went up there, all 6 of us kids and my mom. I think my parents were separated at the time. And on the way up there, we passed like a convoy of military vehicles that were, I think, going to Camp Grayling, so we waved at them. And we just were generally in a good mood and having a good time, enjoying the ride up there. And then when we got into Harbor Springs, the first thing you can see is the steeple of the church. And we pulled up in front of the school, and it was just this really large red brick building, 3 stories. So,
had it been explained to you why you were attending this school?
No. I didn't know why we were being sent there. And originally it was supposed to just be the three older of us. I'm the second oldest, so it was my older brother, then me, and then my sister. And then when we got there, Sister Naomi gave us a little tour of the dormitories and the playroom and the dining room, and this is where the older girls will sleep. This is where my younger sister would sleep. She was really pushing for my mom to leave my younger sister, who was only 6 years old at the time. So she was really pushing her to stay at the boarding school. We have clothes, we have shoes, we have everything she needs. So finally my mom relented and let her stay too.
Did you find out afterward, or do you know why you were sent to the school?
I do know why now. I thought it was because a doctor had told my mom that if she didn't send us away, he would have us taken away from her. And I talked to my brother about it, and he said, no, that's not what happened, that we were a part of the 60s scoop, and that the government came and told my mom that she needed to send us to the boarding school or they would take us away from her. Because when I was at the boarding school, I kept thinking, I couldn't understand why were we there? And I did another interview for our tribal newspaper, and I was like, what did I do that was so bad that I had to be there? And now I know I didn't do anything bad, and we were there because of the government.
What do you remember about how the school looked, sounded, or smelled?
Well, when we pulled up in front of the school, it looked formidable because there weren't any kids outside. And I was told there were going to be lots of little girls to, play with and that kind of thing. And there wasn't anybody outside, no adults, no kids. And so we just went up to the front door and rang the doorbell, and Sister Perpetuella answered the door. And then she called for Sister Naomi to come down, and then she took us around. But I don't remember any smells. I just knew when we pulled up in front of the school that something was wrong, because there weren't any kids out there. I just had a really bad feeling about it.
And initially you had said you had been excited to show up to the school.
Yeah.
So as soon as you showed up, that feeling had left.
Yeah. Yep.
How did it feel to be away from home, family, and community?
It didn't feel good. So when we got there, the first thing they did was separate us. So my brother was in the boys' dormitory, the big boys' dormitory. I was in the big girls' dormitory, and my sister, who was a year younger than me, was also in the big girls' dormitory. But I was on one side, she was on the other side, like way over on the other side. I was literally up against the wall. And then my younger sister, who was 6, she was in the little girls' dormitory. So the only time we really saw each other was at meal times. Otherwise, we didn't like play with each other outside or anything. You stayed with your age group. So I played like softball with my age group, and then my sister's age group, they played like jump rope and stuff like that. And then my little sister was over on the playground. And then my brother was off, with the boys. They just kept the boys and the girls separated too.
How did the other children at the school treat you when you first got there?
Pretty much, I think most of the kids just stuck to themselves. We weren't allowed to visit each other. You just stayed in your own little space. If sister wasn't in the dormitory, of course, then we'd interact with each other. But other than that, we pretty much stayed in our own space. Like, I didn't feel comfortable going to the other side of the dormitory to talk to my sister, to hang out with her, anything like that.
Initially, how did the adults treat you?
Well, initially, sister was very nice. When we first got to the school, she was all smiles and nicey. But after my mom left, everything just changed. So the first night, we were up in the dormitory, and we were getting ready for bed. And we didn't know we had to have rollers for our hair, because you had to curl your hair every night except for Friday nights. And so she shoved me at one of the girls and told that girl that she needed to get rollers in my hair. She's like, get some curlers in this girl's hair before I chop it off with an axe, which terrified me. I was so scared. I really thought she was going to chop my hair off with an axe if we didn't get curlers in it. And I started crying. And she said, we don't have crybabies here. So then I was trying to, not to cry. But, yeah. The only nun there, and you'll hear a lot of other survivors speak about her that was kind to us, was Sister Perpetua. She worked in the dining room. She was just a short little nun, very, very sweet. She always gave us hugs. She always kept an eye out for us if we were working in the dining room. She'd keep an eye out to see if Sister was coming, and then if Sister was coming, she'd come rushing to the back of the dining room, because where we did the dishes was in the back part of the dining room. And she'd be like, shh, Sister's coming. So then we all got busy and worked, but she was good to us. The nun, when I was in 7th and 8th grade, we had a nun that taught math, and fortunately for me, she kind of liked me, I think. But I could add, subtract, multiply, and divide, but when it came to story problems, I was terrified. And I was always afraid she was going to call me up to the board, because she'd call other students up to the board, and if they weren't getting the problem, she would hit them on the back of the head hard enough that they would hit their head on the board. And but then the other nun that taught 7th and 8th grade, she taught history and I think spelling or reading or something. Anyway, she didn't believe in hitting. She was actually the mother of the whole thing. She was like the mother superior or whatever. And the other nun was the principal. But other than that, pretty much we were treated with indifference.
And what was a typical day like for you at the school?
Well, Sister would go downstairs for morning prayer. Sometimes I would hear her, sometimes I wouldn't hear her. And when I hear her coming back up the stairs, I'll cover my head up with my blankets, because you didn't know if she was going to be in a good mood or a bad mood. Was she going to turn on the low lights or flip on the big lights and start, rushing us around? Basically, you'd get up and make your bed first thing, and get dressed, and then go to the back, comb your hair, wash your face, brush your teeth. And I had dining room, so then I put my apron on. We all put our aprons on in the morning, and then went downstairs. We were on the 3rd floor, so went downstairs and put food out and poured hot cocoa and stuff like that. And then after that, we cleaned up, and then cleaned up the dormitory. The girls had to go around and sweep and make sure everything was perfect. All the beds had to line up, all the headstand or I don't think what they're called, nightstands, all our chairs, everything had to line up. Originally we had bedding that had stripes on it, and every stripes had to be straight. Anyway, so then after the dormitory was all good and everything, then we went down to our classrooms. From there we went to church. After church we went back to our classrooms, we did our classes, and then at lunchtime we would go back into the dining room and have lunch, and then back to our classrooms. And then after school, some of the kids would go outside and play. Sometimes the older kids, sometimes we could go out and play, and sometimes we had to stay in and do our homework. Maybe she had other things she wanted us to do later, and she wanted us to get our homework done. And then, we helped get the younger kids ready for bed, put them to bed, and then we could get ourselves ready for bed. And then the older girls, which I was one of the older girls, we could go downstairs and watch TV maybe till 9 o'clock or so.
What was the food like?
That's funny. The food was, breakfast was pretty much always the same. We had mush, which was a cornmeal, and the consistency was kind of like cream of wheat. So we had mush, we had Johnny cake, which was a cornbread, and we had hot cocoa, and that was our breakfast every single day. The other meals, I can't remember exactly what we had. I don't remember, the only meat I can remember is meatloaf. I don't remember chicken, I don't remember beef, I don't remember anything like that. But we did have, like we would have beets, and I just remembered this like last night, honestly. We had beets. I don't like beets, my brother doesn't like beets. And so that's when I was like, if there was butter and salt, that would have been easier to eat. But as I only just recalled last night, I don't remember there ever being butter on the table. I don't remember there being salt or pepper on the tables. And we would always try to get our younger sisters to eat our food. So my brother would take the beet juice and put it on his plate and smear it around so it looked like he ate it, because they would literally walk up and down the aisle making sure that everybody was eating. And so one time we had cottage cheese, and I didn't like cottage cheese. My two sisters liked cottage cheese. And so I asked them, my brother asked my younger sister if she would eat his cottage cheese. And she kind of fussed a little bit because she really didn't want more. And I asked my other sister if she would eat my cottage cheese, and she was like, nope. And I was like, oh shoot. So I would just take a spoonful and take my milk and just swallow it down without like having to really taste it or eat it. And eventually I ran out of milk, and then I don't know, I must have had a look on my face because I was like, now what am I going to do? I still had cottage cheese left. Well, there were two brothers that sat at our table, and one was kind of kitty corner from me, and he slid his milk over to me so I could finish eating my cottage cheese. But we had things like rice and raisins, and they put cinnamon in there with no sugar. So that, it was horrible to eat. They gave us baked apples, again with cinnamon, no sugar. And I don't know if you've ever had, it's not like apple pie, I can just say. So yeah, the food was not that great. It didn't taste great. I know one time everybody in the school got sick except for like 7 girls. And like vomiting, it was horrible. And one of the other survivors had told me that they thought that they fed us boiled fish, and that maybe there was something wrong with the fish. I don't remember. If I didn't like something, like the way it smelled or the way it looked, I wasn't going to eat it. So maybe that's, why some of us didn't get sick. But one time I didn't want to eat something, and sister sent me to bed. And so I went up to the dormitory and got ready for bed. And I know she thought that she was punishing me, but honestly, that was probably the best place for me. I couldn't get into any more trouble, from there, so.
Were there subjects or skills you were taught that stand out in your memory?
I did really well in spelling. I did well in English class. I did not do well in math. And somehow or other I got a C in religious studies. I don't know how that happens when you live with nuns, but we did do a little bit of sewing in sister's workroom. She had a workroom, and we darned socks. So we put a light bulb in the sock, and then you had to darn the sock, which was kind of weird because that room that we were in was just filled with clothes, but we darned socks. I don't know if they were just trying to teach us how to sew or what, but.
What were the rules like, and how are they enforced?
I don't remember any specific rules. I just, you just followed the children, the other kids that were already there. I just did whatever they did. And if you stepped out of line, you could be sure she was going to let you know.
Well, how are the unspoken rules enforced?
Well, sometimes she didn't feel like you moved fast enough. If you didn't move fast enough for her likes, then she would, not very gently, push you from the back of your head, to make you walk faster. I don't know. I don't remember any rules, actually. Just did, whatever everybody else was doing was what I did. If everybody was lining up for church, I got in line for church. We all were assigned different chores, and You know, you just did your chores, you didn't complain about it, you didn't question it, you just did it.
So what about some of the standard school punishments? Detention, extra homework, anything like that?
No, I don't remember anything like that.
So it was almost exclusively like a physical type of consequence.
Everything was physical consequence. You know, we had a girl who wet her bed nightly, and you know, now in this time we know that sometimes there are reasons that people have bedwetting issues. Can be medical, it could be emotional, you know, those kinds of things. But then I don't know what sister was thinking, but that poor girl would get a beating. She was made to wash out her sheets in the bathtub and then hang them out on the fire escape, basically like for the whole world to see. You know, we had a laundry downstairs in the basement. I don't know why she wouldn't have just had her rinse her bedding, you know, her bedding, and then take it downstairs, because we took laundry downstairs every day, every night. So she would get a beating, and I don't know.
Shamed.
Shamed, yeah, humiliated too.
Were you ever able to practice your culture, language, or traditions during that time?
I didn't know the language. We attended powwows when I was little, like up until maybe the age of 6, I would say. We used to go to powwows all the time. And didn't really have much in traditions, because my siblings and I are 3rd generation boarding school survivors. So my father went to Holy Child, his parents went to the boarding school in Mount Pleasant, and eventually one went to Carlisle and one went to Haskell. So the culture became less and less of a thing in our family. So we weren't made aware, you know, of my grandmother didn't ever speak the language that I ever heard. She never taught us anything about being natives or any traditions or anything like that. Even going to my aunts and uncles, they didn't either.
Was there any Native American culture at the boarding school?
No, they did cut our hair. For the longest time, I didn't remember that being a thing. And then I remembered finally that in the back of the dormitory where the sinks were, that's where she would have kids come back there and she would cut your hair.
Do you recall how the adults there viewed Native American culture at the time? Did they ever speak of it, or did they just kind of?
They kind of weaponized it, actually. So I remember there were, and I don't know if I'm supposed to talk about bear walks, but so Sister Diane, who was in charge of the little boys and the boys' side, she came over to our side, and she and Sister Naomi were over by the doorway and sitting on a bed, and so a bunch of girls came and were standing around them. And so they were talking about that. My sister was standing at the way back of the group talking to her friend, and they were laughing. So they were totally unaware of what was being talked about up in the front. And so then Sister Diane was like, "Oh, you think it's funny? You think it's funny?" And they're like, "What?" And then that night, Sister made them put their beds in the back part of the dormitory. So in the back part of the dormitory, there was this big wide space, and the dormitory was here. And this wide space, there was a rack of dresses hanging up, and then Sister's workroom was to the left. And in front of you was this big double wooden doors that went to the boys' side. And it was dark back there. And she made them put their beds back there. And then there was a family of 3 sisters that, for whatever reason, she was always on them about something. Well, my bed was the second bed from the fire escape. And so she had me change places with one of those sisters whose bed was in the row ahead. And that way, if the bear walk came, it was going to get those 3 girls. Well, I'm in this girl's bed, and I'm up half the night praying that, that this thing doesn't come and get me, thinking that I'm her. So that's the kind of thing that they were doing, is just, scaring us like that.
Were there times you felt especially lonely or homesick?
All the time. All the time. Yeah, I missed my mom.
What were some of the hardest parts of being at the school?
Just missing family, missing home. You know, we were poor. We moved around a lot, and when we lived in Detroit, we didn't always have food. My aunts and grandparents would bring food for us, and sometimes, like, my mom would contact St. Vincent de Paul, and they'd drop boxes of food off for us, and they brought stuff at Christmas time too, so there were presents. And I was just telling my son the other day, I said, you know, we got Jell-O, and we were so excited there was Jell-O in the box. And he kind of thought that was kind of funny, but it was so special. But, you know, just as much as we didn't have a lot at home, at least we were at home. At least my mom was always present. Her mom and dad were there. You know, we always had access to family. But at the boarding school, you know, we rarely got mail. And when we did, there would be like a postcard addressed to the Walker children. And visits were very rare. My mom couldn't afford to drive up there. She didn't always have a reliable vehicle. So sometimes my grandparents would bring them up, my mom and my younger siblings. But we didn't go home for Easter. We didn't go home for Christmas or Thanksgiving or anything like that. My mom would try to come up for Christmas, though. And I guess my aunts and uncles would come up, too. I know one time my aunt and uncle came up there, and this was after I aged out. My sisters were telling me that my uncle, and they're not related biologically, but my aunt went to school with my other aunts. Anyway, he asked if he could buy, what did the Walker children need? And sister said, well, they need shoes. And he's like, okay, well, and she's like, but you can't just buy shoes for the Walkers. You have to buy them for the whole school. And he said, how much would that cost? And she said, about $2,000. And we're talking like in the early 70s. And so he wrote a check for the $2,000. And apparently they bought shoes for the whole school. But yeah, I missed being with my family. I missed being with my siblings that were there with me, but we weren't together. We're all under the same roof, but we weren't together.
Did you witness or experience punishment or mistreatment?
I did. I mentioned earlier that the girl that got a beating, other kids got beatings for just random things. I can't remember specifically the incidents. There was an incident with my sister. Like I said, she was 6, and you know, sister gave her everything that she needed. We're getting ready for church, and she came in from the little girls' dormitory, and sister's room was to the back on this end of the big girls' dormitory. So my sister came in. She was walking past a line of girls, and sister came out of her room and wanted to know who was making all that noise, because she had patent leather shoes on. So she had hard-heeled shoes on a wooden floor. And a bunch of girls, and I don't know who they were, they pointed and they were like, Janice Walker, Janice Walker. So she came, and at this point my sister had already walked past me. I was standing in line. And so she was down just a little ways, and sister walked right past me, grabbed my sister by the throat and threw her across the floor. And I just was so horrified. I just stood there, you know, I was scared. And another incident was we had to, at the end of the school year, we had to clean all the floors. So we were on the second floor. She had this big machine, and I can't remember what it's called. It has a big brown brush at the bottom of it. And so my job was just simply to hold the cord out of the water. And somebody else was supposed to pour water on the floor. There was a bucket of water. Well, I don't know where that girl went, but sister needed more water on the floor, so she asked me to pour water. I didn't know how much water to pour because this was my first time doing it. And I poured a little bit of water on the floor, and apparently it wasn't enough because she grabbed the bucket, and when she did, I was still hanging on to it. and she just threw the whole thing to the bucket, and I just went flying across the floor. And then she yelled at me to go find the other girl that was supposed to be there. So I went and found her, but whenever they did something, okay, so as an adult, I understand, okay, she probably didn't mean to throw me across the floor like that. But the other thing is she never apologized. Whenever she did something intentional or unintentional, she never apologized for how she treated us.
What about medical attention if you got sick or injured, or maybe you needed a dentist visit? How did that work?
Like I said, all these kids were sick, and there was no doctor involved. Nobody got any kind of medical attention. I've heard of other kids getting injured playing outside. Somebody's had a really bad injury to their knee. I didn't get any medical treatment for that. I did get a physical towards the end of my last year there, because I was going to go to school in Santa Fe to the Institute of American Indian Arts. And so I had a physical for that. I also remember getting glasses. So apparently I'd gone to the eye doctor, but I don't remember that visit. And I went to the dentist once. There was a local dentist downtown, and we walked down there. But not on a regular basis, and not when somebody was sick. If you were sick, she'd just tell you to go to bed. If you got hurt, she'd say, well, go clean it up, stuff like that. Didn't even offer Band-Aids or anything like that.
How did you cope or comfort yourself during difficult moments?
At night, I cover my head with my pillow and cry really hard, and pray that my dad would come and save me. I was like, if my dad knew what was going on, my dad would come and get me.
What about during the daytime?
During the daytime, just sucked it up and held it in until nighttime.
Were there friendships or bonds with other children that helped you get through?
My first year there, I had a really close friend, and the sister didn't like it. I don't think she really liked us forming strong bonds with each other, and I don't know really why that was. Second and third year, I was there. Then I had a friendship with another girl, because the first one she had left. She was only there my first year. So I had a friendship with her, and then, well, actually, there were two girls there that I had friendships with. But, everybody knew everybody. Like I said, you couldn't go to other people's spaces and visit with them. Even though we didn't have much interaction with each other than playing in the playground, but even then you just played. You didn't sit and talk and talk about the day or anything like that. Now that we've reconnected with other survivors and hearing the other survivors speak their truth, now we are very closely bonded. They're like my siblings, because we all live together, we all have shared experiences. And when we first reconnected, it was in Harbor Springs in the summer, I think it was fall of 21. And they were speaking across the street from where the school was, because it was torn down in 2007. And some of the survivors were speaking, and they were sharing memories that they had and how it impacted them. And I wasn't able to speak at that point yet. But when I left and I was driving home, I just felt like a big weight was lifted off my shoulder, because I wasn't the only one that was traumatized. They were traumatized too. And I just felt like a big weight was lifted off my shoulders, and I felt validated, because it wasn't just me who thought these things were horrible.
How did being at the school change your relationship with your family or community?
Well, like I said, we moved to the reservation in '67 before the boarding school. And so it felt good to be around other Native people. When we went home in the summer times from the school, we were so, I don't know what the word is for it, so ingrained that even to use the bathroom, we'd raise our hand at the dinner table, and my mom would be like, what? And can I go to the bathroom? And she's like, yeah, you don't have to ask. But that's how strict things were at the boarding school. You had to ask for everything. Like you couldn't just go downtown for a walk, which literally it's just steps away from the school. I know I used to volunteer to take mail over to the post office, and I'd walk as slow as I could. It's slow on the way there and slow on the way back. But I don't know, I know as adults now, my siblings and I were really close. We just recently went to Albuquerque on a family trip, and only one of us wasn't there. We had a great time, and it was just really nice for us all to be together, because that rarely happens. Usually it's like one or two of us, three maybe at the most, together. So we're really close family right now. And I don't remember what else I was going to say about that. But
did your experiences at the school change the way you saw yourself as a Native person?
Yeah. So when I was real little, I thought everybody was Native, because, you know, we'd go to my aunties and they're Native, and I knew my mom's siblings were half Native, and we went to powwows and everybody there was Native, so I didn't really know. And then at some point, my dad's mom, my grandma, had made a comment, and that's when I realized that there were other people that were different from us. And then at the boarding school, you know, they always they just said hurtful things, you know, to us about being Native. So after I left the boarding school, you know, there was a lot of shame put on us for being Native. And I would wear knee-high socks in the summertime. Who the heck wears knee-high socks in the summertime? Because I'm trying to hide, you know, the color of my skin. And eventually I went to school in Mount Pleasant. I went to Sacred Heart. And the kids there were like, so where do you live? And I said, I live on the reservation. They're like, where's that? I said, it's out Broadway. And then they wanted to know what I lived in. They're like, what do you live in? A house. And yeah, I was just really surprised by that. But I was I was somewhat introverted as a child. I was very quiet. And then after the boarding school, I was even more introverted. Like my sister and I, two peas in a pod. She was my voice, and she always looked out for me and that kind of thing as we were growing up. So it took me a long time after leaving the boarding school, and several depressions and counseling and things like that, you know. One time I bought a hamburger at McDonald's, and I don't think it was cooked all the way or something, and I called my sister, and she's like, take it back up there, they'll just give you another one. And I was afraid to take it back up there. I didn't want to be in trouble or anything like that, or for them to think I was lying or whatever. She's like, no, just do it. So I did, and they gave it to me. I was like, oh. So that was like the turning point for me, when I could start speaking up for myself. And then this whole boarding school stuff came up. We didn't talk about it much when, you know, years ago. Somebody would say, hey, do you remember this? Do you remember when we did that? Those kinds of things. And we'd talk about it for a few seconds, and everybody would be quiet. Nobody wanted to talk about the boarding school anymore. And so now I've gotten to the point where I do talk about the boarding school, because I think it's important for people to know that it did happen, and that, you know, the things that happened there were real. So.
Are there traditions, practices, or teachings that have helped you in your healing journey?
Yeah. So I started taking classes, I believe in 1995. I learned that Bay Mills Community College had a satellite campus on our reservation in Mount Pleasant. So at that point, I was still very insecure. I didn't think I was smart enough to go to school. So I took 2 classes. I took the History and Organization of Michigan Indian Tribes, and I took Ojibwe. Okay, so when I signed up for school, I was like a day late. They were a day into classes. So when I went to my first Ojibwe class, she gave us a handout of different ways to say is. And I was like 2 or 3 pages. I was like, oh no, what did I get myself into? Because it depends on who you're talking to, whether it's animate or inanimate, which tense you're speaking in, I was like, oh my gosh. But so I ended up getting my associates. I had a 4.0. I did really well. So I did that, and then, like to go to powwows. And I go to a lot of powwows now. Every chance I get, I'll go to a powwow. And I was in powwow, MSU had a powwow in Lansing a few years ago. And I was dancing, and this is when they were still having it in the fall time. And I was dancing, and the sun was shining, and I was listening to the drum, and I was like, this is where I belong. I belong sitting in a church somewhere. This is where I belong. So I go to powwows, I go to round dances in the wintertime, if I can, just things like that. And part of the Indigenous Education Initiative, so they're the organization that is our committee. Anyway, they're working on putting Native American culture, history, and those kinds of things into the school curriculum. So they're working with other survivors. I think at this point there's like 10 or 12 of us that they're working with on the boarding school part of this curriculum.
What role has family, community, or faith played in your healing?
Well, I've learned that I'm more of a spiritual person at this point. I'm not a practicing Catholic anymore. That whole doctrine and everything doesn't fit into my spirituality. I don't know if that makes sense. But can you repeat the question now? I'm lost.
What role has family, community, or faith played in your healing?
Oh, so family, I mostly do a lot of speaking. My younger brother does speaking, and so my younger brother, my sister that's a year younger than me, and I did a podcast together. So, you have that kind of support. I have another sister that lives in Texas. If she were more local, she would be doing the same thing that we're doing. My older brother, he doesn't want to talk about it at all. He says he just put that all behind him, and okay, but,
For those that can take action to help with the damages done, organizations such as churches, what kind of action would you like to see?
Well, we pretty much know that, the Pope has apologized, the President has apologized for the government's role in the whole boarding school fiasco. But for me, I guess, I just want people to know what happened, that these things were real that happened, that the boarding schools were real, that our trauma is real. I don't know how. I'm not really sure that any one of us can truly be healed completely. I think we're all in different phases of healing. So we're all in our own space, we're all in our own time. And the government has apologized, the Catholic Church has apologized. But I know, in speaking with other survivors, they want reparations, they want a monetary compensation for the trauma that they've been through. For myself, I'm mostly interested in putting the information out there, letting people know the boarding schools were a real thing, the trauma was real, our experiences were real.
And what message would you like this exhibit to carry for future generations?
To never let this happen again. Listen to your family members who attended boarding school. Do some research on the whole boarding school era and like who was all involved. Like I didn't realize that it was multiple churches that were involved in this. So I believe it all started with General Pratt, who's put a saying out there, and I'm going to paraphrase, kill the Indian and save the man. So that was the whole premise of this whole boarding school thing, was to assimilate Native American people into the white culture, the white religions, and those kinds of things. I originally thought just the Catholic churches were involved, but have since learned, about the Episcopalians, the Methodists, the Mormons. I don't know why that one surprised me, but that one really threw me. But all these different religious organizations. So it started with the federal government, then I believe it went to the state governments, and then down to the churches. But just to make sure that these things never happen, and give us grace, because we were just kids, and kids should never be treated badly by adults, and especially people who are supposed to be God's representatives. So I have a friend, and her saying was, they used God's good name to do the devil's work, and I think she's right. And then I want to share that saying there, if I can. Thank you. So I found this quote on as I was scrolling in Facebook, and it just struck a chord with me. And I'm going to read it. It's as traumatized children, we always dreamed that someone would come and save us. We never dreamed that it would, in fact, be ourselves as adults. And this was by Alice Little, the Mind's Journal. And that quote, I found that quote, like I said, on Facebook. And, I had mentioned that, I would cry under my pillow at night wanting my dad to come and save. I want anybody to save us. And I think that's why I felt really close to this saying, and I just wanted to share it.